Hi. With today's lecture, we begin our transition from writing JS fiddles to learn Angular to actually implementing a real project. In this lecture, I'll give you a description of the project that we'll be creating and some of the tools that we'll be using to implement this project. So, in the slide available to you, on the first page, you see the project description. Basically, the project we'll be creating is is itself a project management system, which means that the first page on our application will be a login page. And once the user logs in, assuming that the user is signed up, the user will be taken to the dashboard, which would basically list a bunch of projects which have been created using the system. And furthermore, the user will be able to create new projects, delete existing projects, and after clicking on a project, be able to see more details on the project. So to enunciate the features, we are providing a project management dashboard. We are allowing the user to sign up, log in and log out. We are allowing adding and deleting new projects, viewing a list of projects. We'll also make a remote server call just to check out how AngularJS provides the ability to make remote calls. Because when you're working on a real project, you will have a backend associated with it, and you will have to make remote calls. And to avoid the complexity of also writing a backend to implement a project, I have decided to use the browser's local storage as a database system rather than having a remote database. This is a nifty way of faking something like server-side programming while doing a front-end project, while not having to write actual maybe Ruby on Rails or Django code, since this is an Angular class. And finally, we'll also be writing unit tests using a unit test framework, which Angular provides to us. The code for the project can be found on github.com/sidazad/AngularJS. So please feel free to download it, use it, play with it, modify it, extend it. So next, let's go over some of the components of the project, so the things that will actually make the project. And for doing that, I will actually show you a demo of the project in an implemented form. So here I'm using a Safari browser to go to a file locally on my system, index.html. And when I navigate to this file, I see this login page, welcome to the awesome AngularJS projects app. Here I have a sign-in screen where I can maybe put my name, my email, and a password, and I can press on login, which takes me to this new page. Now this page doesn't really have very much on it right now. It says project dashboard for sidazad@gmail.com. So when I click on name, it says name of the project, gives me a tooltip. So let me create a new project. Let's just call it AngularJS project. And the description of it is this is a project to teach programming in AngularJS. I'm going to click on add. When I click on add, I see the project appears over here. So that's the add part. When I click on the project itself, I can see more details on this project on the right. And I have this little field which is extra, which says weather, and it says light rain. So what I'm doing in this field is I'm making a call to an API of a service that provides you weather. And although the weather has nothing to do with this project, it's just a way of giving an example of how you can make a remote call using Angular. Let's just add another project here. We'll call it backend. An implementation of a backend using Django. Click on add. Now we have two projects over here. And you can see the details on either project that you click. Now you can also delete these projects. Let's say we decided that we want a Ruby on Rails backend instead of Django. So we can click on this one and we can click on delete, and it deletes the project. So let's add a new project. backend 2, a Ruby on Rails backend for the AngularJS project. I added. Now I see two projects here. I can search for my projects. So if I only want to look at the backend projects, I can search for backend, and it instantaneously provides me only it filters out the list by whatever I've searched for. So, and then here's a logout button. I can click on that and go back to this page. So this is basically what we are going to implement. And at the end of this course, you should be comfortable implementing this sort of a project. The reason I picked something like this is because it gives us exposure to various things. It shows us how to use the login and logout patterns. And these are very common patterns across the front-end apps. Once you log in, it shows you the project dashboard, where we're using projects over here, but basically this is a very common pattern for web apps, where you can add new items to a list and then view the list, and then you can select one or more items from a list and delete them, or add new items, or you can search for them, see the details, get something from a remote API, and log out. So these are some very common elements that you will find across a variety of web applications. Actually, I can't imagine a web application that doesn't have these elements in them. So that is the rationale behind choosing this sort of an application, that even though it looks like a simple system, it teaches you these very common patterns, which will help you export them across other web applications that you choose to build using AngularJS. So I hope you like the project and you're excited about creating something like this, and be at a place where you have the power to create something like this on your own very easily and very quickly. So going back to our slideshow, we have the login page, and then we have the dashboard page. So there's two pages, and the dashboard page is divided into the left pane, where you can add, view, and delete projects, and the right pane can show you project details. So that's the general layout of our project. Now, making an AngularJS project, we have to have a directory structure, and even though there are several ways that you can have a directory structure, this is one of the recommended ways, especially for smaller AngularJS projects, to have a top-level directory inside of which we have an app directory, which will be our main application directory. Inside the app directory, we have other directories, one for JavaScript called JS, CSS for CSS files, partials. I'll come to this later, but basically you can store templates inside of this, and templates are pieces of HTML code which may have embedded AngularJS. And then we have the test directory, because we will also be writing unit tests for our code. And then we have the index.html file, which is actually your entry point into the application. So that's the basic directory layout. You can also have alternative directory layouts for Angular applications, where you can structure, instead of having all the controllers in one file, you can have files based on application intelligence. That means if you have a part of your application and a controller that works with certain directives, you can piece them together and basically compartmentalize your application based on logical pieces. But that may make sense for really large applications. For a smaller application, that would be overkill. I have used this sort of a directory structure for small to medium-sized applications, and it has worked pretty well. But obviously, you're open to explore more. And finally, the references. This is the GitHub link, and the second one is basically a link that will take you to a module called the local storage module. It's actually a service written by seems like this person named Greg Pike, and we'll be using this service to access the browser's local storage, so we can store the user's data, for example, the projects and such, because we are not using a backend and a database. So we'll be using the browser's local storage for that. So that concludes this lecture, where I have given you an idea of what we are going to be building starting the next lectures. In the next lecture, we will actually start writing a project, and I'll be using an editor called PyCharm, but that doesn't mean you have to use PyCharm. You can use any editor you like, and we won't be using extremely complicated editor functionalities, so it doesn't matter what editor you use. And in the next lecture, we will start our application and set up the first initial pages. Thank you.